3, 2, 1, go. So here's a really easy way to do eyes. So first, let's add a sphere. Okay, so we'll just move it into position. So I'm just shrinking it. I'll move it up so you can see. Move it into position, slide it over. And you can work with one eye or you can mirror it, but for now we'll just work on the one eye. So this looks pretty good. So we'll kind of just stretch it to the space as best we can. Maybe something like that. Let's go ahead and mirror it. So I'm going to hit mirror before I validate. You can also validate it and then choose a mirror later. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to mirror it now and then validate. So now we have these two spheres. So in these eye sockets, I like to make the eye sockets first and then fit the sphere to the eye socket. So firstly, you have to remember that spheres are very round and usually you don't want the eyes to kind of bug out like that. With frogs, it's actually okay, but it still doesn't look quite right. So we're just going to flatten it. So you just use this little blue thing to sort of flatten the sphere, and I'll move it out just so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm using this little blue sphere to kind of just flatten, and that just flattens the surface of the eyes. So now I'll move them back into place. So we have something like this, which looks pretty good, but we still need to do some adjusting. So I'm just going to sort of move these around until they feel like they're in the space. So that's pretty good. And actually, sometimes I just take move and then I'll just kind of, manually just make them even, sort of like that. So they look pretty even. They look pretty natural in the space. Okay, so now we have the white parts of the eye. So I'm going to rename this. So I'm just going to validate it, join children, and I'm going to rename this eye whites. So this is the white part of the eye. So all this is two spheres, which is now just one piece. So that's the eye whites. And another thing you can do is you can take, sometimes I don't like sculpt and color at the same time, but for this tutorial, I'll just color it as well. I'm going to move the paint up here, no roughness. Of course you can have roughness, but I like to make those really glossy. Another thing I like to do is have the skin not so glossy, but then have the eyes glossy. It's nice to have very extreme variants of like matte and then like glossy, because that just looks nice to show different textures. You should always do that in your sculpts if it makes sense. So next we have the eye whites, so we'll add another sphere, and this one we'll just paint black with no roughness. Okay, so now I'll just move it up. I'll move it up, shrink it. So this will be the pupil. So we'll move it into the general area, and then we'll just move it over. You can see it just makes sense already. So now the only problem is you can see that it kind of comes out a little bit too much. So again, you can just take it out and you can flatten it a bit. And you can move it back in. And you might have to, turn it like this. You might have to rotate it a little bit. But you can kind of figure out how you want the eye to look. And then of course you can move it in, you can bring it out, and you can make it as flat as you need it, depending on how flat you want the eye to be to the eye white. So we'll move it like this, maybe. So something like that looks pretty good. And again, if I really don't think that this looks round enough, you can just go on the eye white and I'll just do symmetry so it does it on the other side as well. And you can kind of smooth it. And the reason why I smooth the eye whites is because it'll move it just enough that it will kind of hold its shape, but it'll move it just enough so that this is showing above that layer. So that's pretty much all I'm trying to do. And then once I'm ready, I can just take this one and mirror it, and then you have one on the other side as well. Now he looks a little cross-eyed, so I'm going to change it so that he doesn't. Make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I kind of like this. Maybe I want to see a little bit on the bottom. So another quick note about eyes is you want to like lean it towards the middle of the face. You don't want to put them in the middle because they look weird. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if I mirror this, they're both a little bit in the middle, but they look natural. It looks like he's, you know, they look more natural, kind of towards the middle. Maybe that might even be a little bit better to make him look like he's looking at us. Otherwise, if you put it in the middle, then he looks like it doesn't look right. It looks like he has some sort of eye issue. So you definitely always want to kind of put it towards the middle. The next thing, and this is something that's just because I do all these little details. So the pupil actually does come out from the white parts of our eyes. So the pupil, like naturally, our pupil will poke out a little bit, but you also want to poke out this part as well, like the eyelid. So now that I have that, I'm just going to kind of tuck this out a little bit, just so it's a little more even. Just so the eyelid is a little more even, there's more space going here, because you don't want to look like it's going like through the eye, like cutting the pupil off. So that's the only reason why I would do that as well. So I think this looks pretty good. That's like my trick. If I want to move something ever so slightly, I usually just use smooth, and smooth usually works. Okay, so the eyes look pretty good, but there's still some other things that we can do. So let's take this sphere and this mirror. So right now, I'm just going to rename this mirror just so we don't get confused. I'm going to rename this P1. All right, so that's the pupil. So this is the sphere. I'm going to name this P1 as well. This is just so I don't get confused. So this is P1 and P1. So let's clone this. So now we've cloned the whole mirror. And I'm going to name this one Iris. I'm going to name this Iris. Okay, so we have the eye right here, which I think is actually called the sclera, I believe. So we have the eye white. We're just going to call it eye white. We have the black. So we have pupil and we have iris. So the pupil is the smaller black part that's in the middle. The iris is the part of our eye that's colored. So the iris would be, so the P1 would be smaller than the iris. So let's hide P1 for now and just go to iris. And let's just color it whatever color we want. So let's say we wanted to color it like, we'll just do like a dark brown or so. Okay, so now you see that the eyes are like a dark brown. Perfect. So now let's take P1 and unhide P1. Actually, we can go ahead and validate both of these as well. So if we go to P1, you can see that actually one is brown and one is black. They kind of like flip-flop because they're both occupying the same space. So we're going to take P1. We just need P1. We need the pupils to just move back the tiniest bit, so all you see is the iris. So just make sure that you're on P1. Okay, P1. So now we have all our shapes here. So we'll go to smooth. We can make it fairly big, and it's mirrored, so we don't need to do symmetry or anything. So now we'll just take the smooth and we'll smooth back P1, and you'll notice that you'll start to see the iris on both sides. So that's it. Nothing too crazy. So we smoothed back P1, so now it's right under the surface. So next, we're going to use the stamp. So we'll use the stamp. We'll go to the stamp settings here, and we go to alpha. And yours probably will look like this. And usually I just move it all the way up so that it's white all within that red circle, or that red ring. Fall off, I think this is decent. Maybe let's try this one. Yeah, I don't think we need to really mess with anything else. You probably don't even need to mess with this. So anyway, we're just going to use the stamp. So how the stamp works, this alpha right now, the alpha is just like a white box with a red circle. So that red circle is going to be like what we're going to use. So let's hit sub. because if we're hitting sub, then instead of making a stamp where it's going to pull that circle like up, if we use sub, it's going to like make a depression in that circle. And the depression is going to be in the shape of this like fall off. And it's going to be this red circle. So we have our stamp ready to go. We just need to make sure that we're on not P1, because we want P1 to be showing, but we want to be on iris. So then you just take the stamp and you just drag. Oh, I guess you have to be on the iris. It's mirrored, so you have to do it on the one that's the real shape, because right now there's only one sphere, but it's just mirrored, so you have to do it on the actual one. So just take your stamp and just go like this. That's a little too far. I'm going to make it a little bit further out. So maybe something like that. Yeah, I like the way that looks. So essentially all we did, and if this is confusing, hopefully this will make sense. All we did was we have a sphere here, and we have the black sphere that's the pupil. And really, the black sphere is pretty much the same size as the iris. It's just a little bit smaller because we smoothed it. And then we just used the stamp to push down this sphere so that you're just seeing the black sphere underneath. So that's like literally all it is. Okay, so now we can actually paint on this iris and make it look more like an iris. But there's a few things that we have to do first. So let's validate, join children. So now we have these irises. So make sure you're on the iris, make sure you're on this layer, make sure you're using paint. And now we can paint on that layer. But notice it only goes on one. We don't want it to be mirrored because then it'll be on the wrong side. So first I'm just going to do like a lighter layer of this lighter brown color. And if you want to know how I got I had to edit this a little bit, so I want to make sure that I show this part. So I just took this color. So I grabbed this, grabbed the eyedropper, took that brown color, and then go to the color again, and then just make it a little lighter. So adding a little color around the iris. I'm going to do that around both. Like that. You can take Smoothie Poo, which is smooth with 0 intensity. It's the same thing. But you can save it so that you have just this other tool. And you can kind of smooth this out. Make it look a little bit more natural. Okay, so we smooth that out. But we also want to add some lightness just right here. So on both sides, we're going to add some lightness right there. You can smooth it out. Okay, I'm going to make this lighter. And then add some lightness here. Okay, smooth it out. Okay, smooth this out too. And then I'm going to go even lighter. Paint in even lighter. See that? All right, so then we have like just a little bit more of a glass look. I probably should have, I'm going to take smudge and just smudge this over a little bit so they look like they're kind of occupying the same space. This is the only thing that I like smudge for. So we have something like that. So it looks a little weird now because we don't really have this lit. So we're seeing it very flat. So it doesn't look as good as it could look. But let's take a look at it when we add a little bit of something to it. So first we'll take post-process and turn post-process on. Post-process will look really dark like this if you don't have any lights, which I don't. I'm going to turn the quality up. And this is my own, I think it is. Let's see. That's a little bit better. So, you can save your post-processing profiles. It doesn't need to be so dark. I don't know why this is so dark like that. Okay, that looks a bit better. I don't think we need any of this stuff. Okay, so that looks a bit better. but we don't have any lights. So now we're just going to add a light like this. Maybe we'll turn this down, this environment. So we'll turn the environment down. So now that we've added a light, it adds all of these shadows to everything. So now the eyes look a bit better because you're adding all of these shadows, all the natural shadows from the light. So, and that's what we're mimicking. We're mimicking a light coming down this way, and the light will be shining on these and coming through this bottom part of the iris. So that's what I was mimicking when I was doing the painting. It looks, to me, it looks a lot better now. It looks a lot more realistic. So the other thing is, usually when you have the light here, it's because the light is coming from this side. So that's why you see that white round like spot of light usually on eyes. So that's usually the light source. So the light source will hit it and it will go through the, our cornea, which is like clear, and then the light shines on the other side showing, this concave, because it's sort of concave. We have like a clear cornea and all that technical stuff. So the only thing that would make this look better to me is if I had that white pop of light there. And that's why I use this environment that I created. I'm going to move it up a little bit, and I'm going to move the rotation just to try and show you. It's a little bit easier when, let's see if I can find it. Okay, so I can't really find it here. Put this back down. But we can probably get it with a light. So if I add, let's see, let's change it to spotlight. Okay, we'll move it up. Okay, at least I can see it there. But anyway, so now you see that white light there. Let's see if I can make this a little bit. Oh, it doesn't really change the shape of that light. Oh, now I can see it. Now I can see the other thing too that I was talking about. So let's actually turn this light off. And now that I angle it this way, and of course you can see how it kind of takes some maneuvering sometimes to get all the elements right. And that's why I usually bring things over into Blender. It's just a little bit easier because you have a little more control over the lights and stuff like that. It just takes a little more time to get it in Nomad sometimes. So I'm using this environment, but I'm going to change the rotation so that it's on the correct side. So I would really ideally want it to be sort of like here. So like it looks like the light is coming from above, and you can actually still see, I wonder if that's the sunlight we're seeing. There's another little pop of white. Oh yeah, so it's the sun. So that's the other light we're seeing. But these pops of light here is what makes this light up here. And I can probably add even a little bit more paint. I'll bring it down a little bit. I can probably add a little bit more here. And then kind of smooth it out a little bit. And you can kind of adjust it, but you just want the light to kind of be hitting in the same spots. And I wish I could make it a little bit brighter right here. Make this smaller. Smooth that out a little bit. Okay. So that's probably the best we can do. But personally, I think this looks a lot better, especially when you use the lights. Again, if you don't have these on, if you don't have lights and you're just using your exposure and you don't have post-process on, then they can look a little silly. If you're just looking at it straight, like it might not make sense. But that's usually the technique I use nowadays. It's much easier than like carving in the spheres and things like that. I don't really do that much anymore. I kind of just do them this way. But hopefully that makes sense. But it might take some getting used to and take some practice, because when you're using post-process and things like that, things just look different. So sometimes you have to play around with things while you're in post-process. That's also the reason why sometimes I'll take this white, the eye whites, and I'll add a layer. And I'll literally just take this white color, not that I need to take it, but then I'll just have a little bit of a darker version, and I'll paint in this shadow. So the reason why I do this a lot of times is because sometimes I'll make it darker and then just like really darken it up to make that shadow. And the reason why I do this is because it just helps out certain things that I want the shadows or something amplified. Then this really just helps that out. It makes it a little bit more realistic. And the reason I do it on a layer is because let's say I do this, but I'm like, oh, it's a little too dark. Then I can just take the layer and I can lower the opacity of it so that it's just a smidge darker. And we have just that little bit of shadow. But yeah, otherwise I think this looks good. But I think it's just something that you just have to practice and get it right. And just remember, when you look at lights, like especially like anime or manga, they have those big bright white pops of light. So wherever that is, like say the pop of light is here, then the light is coming. That means that's where the light is hitting. So the light's going to come through on the opposite side on the iris. So the pop would be here. So the light pops and the light shines on this part of the iris, and it would be on both sides. But obviously this is very thin, so I'm just going to make it sort of close to this pupil. But try it with different colors and things like that. I'm going to make these other eyes too, and then I'll bring it over into Blender so we can see the difference between Nomad and Blender. There's another part of this as well. I'm actually going to darken this side, so it's actually going to give the effect that that this part of the iris is actually like curved down, and that there's a shadow from this edge. So it's like white going up, and then the iris falls off like that. So that's what I'm going to do here. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to go more in depth, then definitely check out my Skillshare classes where I am a top teacher. I have about 50 classes, both Procreate and Nomad Sculpt. I also have a few classes on Udemy, so if you want to learn more, or you just like my style, you like the way I teach, you want to support me, those are some other places that you can do it. Thanks again, keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all in the next video.